On Earth, we learn about the night without ever being taught it. We learn it by living inside one particular arrangement of sky, one sun at one distance, one atmosphere deep enough to turn daylight blue and soften the edges of evening, one moon that brightens and fades in its familiar rhythm above the turning of the world. By the time we are old enough to notice these things, our bodies already know them. They know the look of late light on a window, the way clouds can hold brightness after sunset, the hush that settles over rooftops and trees when the day begins to loosen its grip. We know what darkness feels like here, not because we studied it, but because this is the version of darkness that made us. And that is part of why this kind of journey can feel so warm. We are not only looking outward tonight, we are using the night we know to imagine the nights we have never seen. Tonight's journey is called Fall Asleep on Different Worlds. Beyond Earth, other worlds keep their own versions of darkness, evening under a sky with no air in it at all. Daylight already softened by amber haze, as though a world had chosen dusk as its permanent language. A giant planet hanging motionless above a frozen plain. Rings turning the sky into something that feels less like openness than shelter, and somewhere, perhaps, a twilight that never quite ends. Night, then, is not a single condition shared evenly across the universe. It is local. It belongs to the relationship between a world and its star, between atmosphere and light, between gravity and distance, between whatever sky exists above a place and the ground that receives it. So tonight, we are going to move slowly through some of those places, not as tourists, not as surveyors, and not in search of danger or spectacle. We are simply going to ask a quieter question. What would rest feel like there? What would it feel like to stand beneath a sky you were not born under, and let its light, its silence, and its sense of scale settle over you long enough for it to become familiar? We will begin close to home, on the nearest world beyond Earth. Then little by little, we will travel farther out into softer light, stranger atmospheres, colder horizons, and deeper forms of quiet. And by the time we return, our own night may feel a little different, not less ordinary, but rather more beloved. This is the gentle cosmos. If you feel like leaving a small note for us, I would love to know which of these worlds you think you would most want to fall asleep on. But there is no need to decide now. You can simply listen and rest. The first thing you notice is the silence. On Earth, even quiet has air inside it. A room carries the faint hum of itself. A forest carries distance. A sleeping house carries breath and settling wood. But here, there is nothing for sound to move through. Whatever the landscape does, whatever small grain of dust shifts or tiny rock settles along a crater wall, it does so without a whisper. You are standing on the surface of the moon, and the ground beneath you is pale and fine, like the color of old chalk. It holds your weight with an unexpected softness. The regolith, the name given to this ancient powdered surface, is the result of billions of years of slow bombardment, every impact grinding the rock a little finer, a little smoother, until the top layer became something almost like flour, though with a sharp and angular texture at the grain level that is nothing like flour at all. It holds the shape of footprints perfectly. It will hold them for millions of years undisturbed, because there is no wind here to erase them. The sky above you is black, not earth dark, not the softened dark of a clear winter night, but a dense, permanent, unyielding black, because the moon has no atmosphere to scatter the light of the sun into color. This gives the moon its peculiar quality, the simultaneous presence of blazing light and total darkness, with almost no gradation between them. Stand in full sun and your shadow beside you is ink black. Step into the shadow of a boulder, and even with the sun a few degrees away, it is as dark as the inside of a closed room. But turn around, look up toward the direction you came from, and there is Earth. It hangs in the black sky like something a child might have placed there, blue and white and impossibly vivid against the darkness around it. From the surface of the moon, Earth does not rise or set the way the moon rises and sets for us. The moon always keeps the same face turned toward Earth, the same ancient gravitational lock that gives us our familiar near side. And so from any fixed point on the lunar surface, Earth simply hangs in the sky, moving only slightly as the moon rocks gently in its orbit. It is always there, a blue lantern, a reminder. From the moon's equatorial regions, Earth sits near the horizon. From some high latitudes, it rides higher. But wherever you stand, it is the most colorful thing in the sky, the only colorful thing. And there is something in the human nervous system that responds to it before the mind has had time to process what it is seeing. It is familiar, it is home, but seen from here, it is also something else. Small and quiet and radiantly, obviously alive in a way that the landscape around you is not. The moon is the oldest shoreline we have. It formed roughly 4.5 billion years ago, very shortly after Earth itself, when a Mars-sized body struck the early Earth in the first 100 million years of the solar system's life. The debris coalesced in orbit, cooled, and became the world beneath your feet. The moon is, in a real sense, part of Earth. Part of the same original material, reshaped by violence and time into its own patient sphere. And it has been patient. The large craters that define its face from Earth were formed mostly in the first billion years of the solar system, during a period of intense bombardment. Since then, the moon has changed only very slowly. The surface you are standing on may look exactly as it looked 100 million years ago. There is no erosion here, no plate tectonics, no rain, no life, just the steady, imperceptible rain of micrometeorites and the slow tide of solar radiation, doing their patient work over timescales that make human history look like a breath. Standing here, in that silence, beneath that permanent black sky, with Earth hanging in its characteristic place above the horizon, there is a quality to this place that is very hard to name. The solitude here is too absolute to feel personal. It is something closer to clarity. Everything unnecessary has been removed. There is rock and sky and light and shadow and earth. That is all. And in that reduction, something in the mind becomes very quiet. The moon gives us the clearest possible view of Earth, not because it is far, but because it is close enough to recognize home and empty enough to have nothing competing for your attention. From here, the world you came from looks like a small, soft thing, and that is its own kind of gift. The light here is different. Mars announces itself through light, before the cold, before the smallness of your own weight in the weaker gravity, before the old volcanic plains and the distances that seem to go on without end. there is the color of the air. Sunlight on Mars has traveled about 1.5 times farther than sunlight on Earth, and it shows. The overall brightness is lower, roughly equivalent to a heavily overcast day at Earth's surface. But the strangeness is not in the dimness. It is in the color. The Martian sky is not blue. During the middle of the day, depending on how much dust is suspended in the atmosphere, the sky can be a pale butterscotch, or a dusty tan, or a soft pinkish brown. The fine iron oxide particles that give Mars its rust-colored surface are light enough to be lofted into the thin air, and once airborne, they scatter sunlight differently than Earth's atmosphere does, absorbing the blue end of the spectrum rather than spreading it, leaving warmer tones to fill the day. But the twilights, on Mars, at the beginning and end of the day, the colors reverse. The dust that warms the daytime sky to amber now scatters the lower angle sunlight into something unexpected, a pale bluish glow that spreads along the horizon after sunset, while the rest of the sky above deepens toward near black. Here, the blue lingers low and the warmth rises to meet the dark. Photographs taken by the rovers on Mars show this precisely. A cool, faint blue gathered close to the horizon at dusk, the inverse of an Earth sunset. The sky saves its last coolness for the final moment of the day. It is one of the strangest and most beautiful things the cameras have ever returned to us. The landscape around you is old, genuinely, almost incomprehensibly old, but it does not carry its age the way a jungle does, dense with the continuous evidence of things growing and dying. Mars feels old the way a stone left on a windowsill feels old, quiet, settled, patient. The planet lost most of its magnetic field billions of years ago. And without that shield, the solar wind slowly stripped away the denser atmosphere it once had. What remains is less than 1% of Earth's atmospheric pressure, just enough to carry dust, not enough to hold sound. The scale here is geological in the most literal sense. Volcanic mountains so gradual in their slope that you could walk their flanks for days without feeling the incline. Canyon systems wider than continents, their far walls dissolved into the dust haze distance, long before the eye could reach them. But scale on Mars does not announce itself. It simply recedes in every direction, patient and unhurried, asking nothing of you. In all of this landscape, there is no sound. There are no birds. There is no water moving over rock. The thin air cannot carry even the whisper of a distant gust. Everything here communicates in a language of light and shadow, distance and stillness. The solitude of Mars is not the solitude of isolation. It is the solitude of scale. You are standing inside a world large enough to feel infinite, and empty enough that every feature you can see, every crater rim, every rock formation, every gentle slope of volcanic plain carries a particular weight. Mars does not feel abandoned, it feels composed, a landscape that has found its equilibrium and is content to hold it. At night on Mars, the sky fills with stars in a way that is almost familiar. The Milky Way arches overhead, much as it does from a dark desert on Earth. The two small moons, Phobos and Deimos, cross the sky in their different rhythms. The temperature drops fast and far, and the thin ground radiates back the warmth it borrowed from the day. In that cold, under those stars, in that silence, Mars offers something rare, the feeling of a world that does not need you, not hostile, settled into its own deep time in a way that requires nothing from you and gives you in return the peculiar peace of being somewhere older than memory and spacious enough for thought to loosen. There is a comfort in that, if you let yourself feel it. Something shifts as you arrive here. The air tells you first. Titan has air, real, substantial, atmospheric air, denser at the surface than Earth's, and it carries a quality that changes how everything else looks and feels. Because this air is not clear, Titan's atmosphere is thick with a persistent organic haze. Complex hydrocarbons formed when sunlight and Saturn's magnetosphere interact with the nitrogen and methane that make up the bulk of the atmosphere. This haze settles over Titan like a permanent, layered veil. It is orange, not the sharp, vivid orange of a sunset, but something softer. Amber, golden brown, the colour of old varnish or the light in a room where curtains have been drawn against afternoon sun. It gives the entire world a quality of diffusion. Everything is slightly softened. The light, already weakened by the enormous distance from the sun, Saturn sits nearly 10 times farther from the sun than Earth does, passes through all of this haze and arrives at the surface gentle and dim and warm in colour, like the light inside a paper lantern. The horizon on Titan is lower than Earth's because Titan is smaller, but it does not feel small. The haze ensures that distances lose their edges. What is near is clear, what is far is soft. What is very far dissolves into a gradated orange-brown that makes the atmosphere itself feel solid, enclosing, like being inside something rather than beneath something. You are, in a sense, sheltered here. The landscape beneath this amber sky is genuinely alien, and yet something about it reaches toward the familiar. There are dunes, enormous longitudinal dunes of dark hydrocarbon material swept into long parallel lines by Titan's wind patterns, stretching for hundreds of kilometers. From a distance, they look like dark ripples, subtle and rolling, giving the equatorial regions a texture like a gently rumpled blanket. There are plains of water ice, hard as rock at these temperatures, carved by ancient flows. And there are lakes. Titan is the only world in the solar system, other than Earth, known to have stable liquid on its surface. But the lakes on Titan are not water. They are methane. Liquid methane, at those temperatures, behaves similarly to how water behaves on Earth. It evaporates, forms clouds, falls as rain, fills low-lying depressions, and drains back toward the poles. Titan has a methane cycle the way Earth has a water cycle, and the result is a world that looks, in certain ways, like a dark mirror of our own. The northern polar regions hold most of the larger lakes and seas. Ligeia Mare, one of the greatest of them, covers an area comparable to the combined surface of several of North America's Great Lakes. Its surface is dark and very still. Liquid methane on Titan is remarkably calm because Titan's winds are gentle and its gravity does not encourage the wave dynamics of Earth's oceans. The surface of the methane sea, seen in radar imaging from the Cassini spacecraft, is flat to an almost uncanny degree. Smooth, quiet, reflective. Standing at the edge of such a sea, if you could, would be an experience without comparison. The liquid before you would be dark, perhaps slightly translucent at the edges where it was shallower. The amber sky above would be reflected in it, softened and inverted so that the horizon between surface and sky would be almost indistinguishable. The light would be dim enough that even midday on Titan would feel like very early morning on an overcast Earth day, or the quiet last light of dusk. Not dark exactly. More like everything had been turned down slightly, softened just below full brightness, as though the world were asking you to slow your eyes. The organic haze above Titan is genuinely beautiful, and it is active. Sunlight and charged particles are always working on the atmosphere, building new molecules slowly and continuously so that the air itself feels less like a backdrop than an ongoing process. The world is always making something of its dim light. We do not know whether Titan has ever hosted anything like life. What we do know is that it changes. The haze is always being made. The lakes gather and release. Clouds form and fade. Even here, in this distant cold, the world is not still. There is something quietly profound in that, a world that is, in its own dark and cold and hydrocarbon way, doing something, processing, transforming, cycling its materials through atmosphere and surface and back again under the dim and distant sun without any need for life or observation or understanding. Saturn, if you could see it from Titan's surface, would be largely hidden by the haze. On a clearer day, particularly at the poles or at certain altitudes, it might be visible as a pale, enormous disk through the amber atmosphere, ringed and massive, close enough to feel present rather than astronomical. Saturn's disk in Titan's sky would span roughly 11 times wider than the full moon appears in Earth's sky. On a clear evening, low and large, it would hang above the horizon like something out of a dream. But even without Saturn visible, even in the amber haze of an overcast Titan day, there is a quality to this world that does something unusual to the imagination. The haze does not oppress, it contains. It is the difference between standing in an empty field under a hard sky and standing inside a gently lit room. Titan feels, in some atmospheric sense, enclosed, private. The universe is still out there beyond the top of the haze, but the haze gives you permission to stop worrying about it. You are inside. The amber light is soft. The sea is quiet. The chemistry of the air moves its patient molecules through their endless cycles, and the world goes on, and the light dims toward evening, and the haze catches what remains and holds it. Titan is far from home, but it does not feel like it. Everything here is white, the ground, the ridges, the broad, gently rounded plains that stretch to every horizon, white and pale grey and the softest blue, where shadow pools in the low places between pressure ridges. Europa is covered in water ice, almost entirely, and what you are standing on is a shell of frozen ocean that extends for tens of kilometers beneath your feet. Below that ice, kept liquid by the tidal forces of Jupiter's enormous gravity, there is an ocean, a real ocean, of water. The estimates suggest it holds roughly twice the volume of all of Earth's oceans combined. It has been there, kept liquid by the flexing and stretching that Jupiter's gravity imposes on the Moon with every orbit. For potentially billions of years, it is warmer than the surface, perhaps only a few degrees above freezing in its upper layers, or perhaps warmer near the seafloor, where the tidal heating reaches its greatest intensity. There may be hydrothermal vents along the ocean floor. There may be chemistry in those warm, mineral-rich waters that have been doing interesting things for a very long time. But standing on the surface, you would not know any of this. The ocean is sealed beneath you. The ice insulates everything below it from the void above. The surface is cold, roughly negative 160 degrees Celsius, and the ice holds its silence completely. The landscape of Europa has a beauty that is almost geometric in its quality. The most striking features are the lineae, long, dark, reddish-brown ridges and bands that crisscross the entire surface in intersecting arcs. These are fractures in the ice, healed and reopened over and over across geological time, stained with minerals from the water below that have wicked up through the fractures and frozen at the surface. They give Europa the look of something mapped, as though enormous, gentle hands had traced the surface with deliberate care, leaving pale lines of reddish-brown that curve and cross in patterns that suggest both order and age. From the ground, standing between two of these ridges, they rise gradually on either side, perhaps several hundred meters at their highest, their slopes striated and pale. The ice under your feet is crossed with finer fractures, a mosaic of smaller pieces that have refrozen together again and again, giving the surface a texture like cracked eggshell seen from very close, textured and detailed in a way that rewards attention. Above you, Jupiter. Jupiter from Europa's surface is enormous. The disk, swirled with pale orange and brown and cream, belted with its famous alternating bands of cloud, spans nearly 12 degrees of sky. Our full moon spans half a degree. Jupiter, from Europa's surface, appears roughly 25 times wider than the full moon from Earth. It dominates the sky without crowding it. It is a presence rather than a spectacle, an enormous, beautifully patterned world hanging where sky should be, its detail visible to the naked eye, the banding, the subtle swirling at the belt edges, the long oval of the great red spot when the rotation brings it into view. Because Europa is tidally locked to Jupiter, keeping the same face pointed toward its planet the way the moon keeps the same face toward Earth, Jupiter does not move across the sky. It simply remains slowly rotating in place as you watch it, its bands drifting at different speeds, the whole disk turning like a slow, enormous wheel. The light here is a mixture. Sunlight arrives weakened by the distance. Jupiter is about 5 times farther from the Sun than Earth, and what reaches the surface of Europa is reflected and scattered by the white ice into a diffuse, pale illumination. But Jupiter also contributes its own light, reflected sunlight from the planet's enormous, cloud-bright disk, casting a warm, slightly orange secondary light that plays softly against the white surface. At night, with Jupiter overhead, Europa would not be entirely dark. The Jovian glow would illuminate the landscape in warm tones, like light from a candle held over fresh snow. The mystery of what lies beneath the ice of Europa is one of the most profound, open questions in planetary science. We know that the ocean is there, the evidence substantial, coming from magnetic field measurements, surface geology, and theoretical modeling refined over decades. We know that the tidal heating from Jupiter has kept it liquid for a very long time. We know that liquid water, mineral chemistry, and an energy source are present together, the basic ingredients that life, as we understand it, requires. What we do not know is whether anything has made use of them. Standing on the surface of this quiet, ice-white world, looking up at the luminous disk of Jupiter slowly turning, that unknown feels sacred rather than unsettling, a question the world is keeping for itself. Gently, the ocean below is hidden, the way depth is always hidden from the surface, the way sleep hides its own interior from the waking mind. Europa holds its secret quietly. The ice seals it in, the cold preserves it. Jupiter watches from above, and the surface gleams white, still and patient, keeping its quiet, asking nothing, offering a stillness so complete that it feels almost deliberate. This world is very small, just 500 kilometers across, roughly the distance between two large-sized cities on Earth. You could circle its equator in the time it takes to drive across a large country. Its gravity is so slight that you would weigh only a small fraction of what you weigh on Earth. A gentle step would carry you several meters. A small jump, if you were not careful, could send you into a slow, dreamlike arc that would take a very long time to bring you back to the ground. And yet, Enceladus is doing something remarkable. The surface here is the most reflective in the solar system. Enceladus reflects nearly all of the sunlight that reaches it, because its surface is composed almost entirely of fresh, clean water ice, constantly renewed, constantly resurfaced by the processes happening below. Standing here, the brightness is significant even at this distance from the sun. The ground underfoot is almost luminous. It has a blue-white quality, the ice slightly granular, slightly crystalline in its surface structure, catching what sunlight there is and redistributing it evenly in all directions. The landscape is not complex. There are few of the dramatic cliffs or towering ridges that Europa has. The surface of Enceladus has a smoother quality in most regions, interrupted occasionally by older, more cratered terrain in the northern hemisphere, and by the extraordinary feature of its south polar region, a relatively warm, geologically active area defined by 4 parallel fractures in the ice, each running for roughly 130 kilometers, known informally as the tiger stripes. From these fractures, material rises from the interior ocean below and escapes into space. The plumes of Enceladus, water vapor and ice particles carrying traces of salts and organic material, rise from the tiger stripes in diffuse, persistent columns, reaching hundreds of kilometers above the surface before dispersing into Saturn's E-ring. From a distance, the plumes are not violent. They are quiet. They spread upward and outward with a gradual, feathery dispersal, more like a slow exhalation than an eruption, a world breathing. Standing anywhere but the south polar region, you would not see them directly, but you would sense the quality of process, a world doing something below its still surface, the way you might know something is happening in the next room without being able to see it. Above you, Saturn. From Enceladus, Saturn is even larger in the sky than it is from Titan. The moon sits closer to the planet. Saturn's rings, seen from this angle, appear as a thin, luminous arc crossing the planetary disk, gleaming a line of reflected light against the black sky. The planet itself is pale gold, its bands subtle, its disk enormous and quietly luminous in the darkness. The silence on Enceladus is total in the way all airless worlds are silent, but it carries a different quality than the moons or Europas. Knowing what is happening below, the ocean, the thermal activity, the plumes lifting their chemistry quietly into space, makes the silence feel inhabited rather than vacant, as though the world is thinking, as though all its activity has moved inward to the warm and hidden place beneath the ice, and the surface is simply the quiet face it presents to the universe, composed and still and white as new snow, covering interior warmth with exterior calm. There is something recognizable in that. We do it too sometimes. Rest on the surface while something deeper keeps moving. Lie still while the interior does its patient work. Sleep while the body maintains its endless, careful processes, and the mind goes somewhere we cannot see or name. Enceladus is small. Its light is quiet. Its plumes drift gently into Saturn's ring system and become part of something larger, without any urgency, without any sound. It is, among all the places we have visited tonight, the one that most feels like it is sleeping. Some skies feel open. This one feels built. Imagine standing on a quiet moon of Saturn and looking up as the rings spread across the full width of the sky. Let the geometry of it become real to you. The rings of Saturn are among the most beautiful structures in the solar system. They're also among the most misrepresented because in photographs, even the extraordinary photographs returned by Cassini, some of the finest images ever taken in the history of human exploration, they compress the ring's true scale into something that the eye reads as decorative, a backdrop, an aesthetic feature. Standing beneath them from the right moon, they are something else entirely. The exact moon matters less than the arrangement, the right orbital distance, the right tilt, and the ring plane opening overhead. The rings, seen from within the plane of the ring system, from a moon that orbits in or near that plane, span the entire sky from horizon to horizon. They do not appear as the familiar thin band you see from a distance. They appear as an enormous arc of light, wide and structured and impossibly ordered, crossing the sky like a softly luminous road seen from directly underneath. The rings are not a solid surface. They are composed of billions of individual particles of water ice, ranging in size from grains the scale of fine sand to chunks the size of houses, all orbiting Saturn in their own individual paths, packed closely enough that from a distance they merge into the appearance of a solid, flat disk. Each particle follows its own orbital path, slower in the outer rings and faster in the inner rings, in accordance with gravity's patient mathematics. And yet, from below, what you see is order. The way the density varies across the rings. The bright, dense B ring at the center, the slightly more transparent A ring beyond it. The Cassini division between them where orbital resonances have cleared a relatively empty gap. All of this structures the light differently. The Cassini division appears slightly darker, a subtle banding in the bright arch overhead. The B ring blazes, the inner rings fade. The outer rings shimmer with the light of ice in diffuse sunlight, their individual particles catching and releasing the sun's distant glow. in a constant, gentle flickering that the eye cannot quite resolve into individual motion. From this perspective, it feels less like looking at an astronomical phenomenon and more like looking at a ceiling. That word is not meant to reduce it. A magnificent ceiling, a cathedral ceiling, something built at a scale that the architecture of stone could never approach, but which carries the same quality of enclosure, of being covered, of having something ordered and intentional above you, of standing inside rather than outside. The sky above you is also Saturn, to one side enormous and close, its pale gold disk filling a significant arc of the sky, the cloud bands visible, the subtle gradient of its atmosphere rendered in faint, beautiful banding. Saturn is not quite as brilliant as Jupiter from its moons. Its cloud tops are subtler, but its size more than compensates. It has a quiet grandeur. Its clouds move slowly. Its storms, when they appear, are patient and enormous, and follow cycles that span decades. Below Saturn's disk, depending on your angle, you might see the shadow of the rings drawn across the surface of Saturn in a thin, dark arc, a feature visible from Earth on a good night, and extraordinary from closer in. And above the rings, the star field, black and absolute, unchanged from any other vantage point in the outer solar system. The stars of the Milky Way filling the spaces between the ring arcs with their ancient light. There are few images in the history of planetary exploration more striking than the photograph Cassini took from inside Saturn's shadow. In 2013, a view of Saturn backlit by the sun, its rings illuminated from behind, every particle of ice glowing from within. The image, including, in the lower right, a small pale blue dot, Earth, visible from 1.4 billion kilometers away. A pixel. It was not the first time Earth had been photographed from such a distance, but the framing, Saturn sheltering the view, the rings spread around the backlit planet, Earth suspended in the dark, gave that small dot a particular quality. It looked cared for, held within something much larger and somehow safer for it. That feeling of being held within a structure far larger than yourself, of resting beneath something that arches overhead with order and beauty, is what this place offers. The rings are not a symbol. They are not trying to mean anything. They are the outcome of orbital mechanics and the distribution of mass and the behavior of ice in a gravitational field, working together over millions of years into something of extraordinary visual coherence. But we bring meaning to what we see, always. We cannot help it. And what this sky suggests, what this vast, ordered arch of light overhead seems to say, is something that the body receives before the mind has words for it. You are small here, and the sky above you feels shaped, ordered, and near. It is simply busy doing something beautiful. Here the sun is a star, bright still, noticeably brighter than the stars around it, easily identifiable, the brightest point in the sky by far, but it gives no warmth that the body can perceive. It is a light without heat, a lamp in a room that has been cold for so long that cold has become its natural condition. What Pluto offers is remoteness without exile. It is simply a place that is very far away, doing its slow work, in a quality of light that asks nothing of you. The cold here is total, and therefore somehow beyond category. The silence is the silence of great distance, where nothing carries and the universe holds its breath. Pluto sits, on average, nearly 40 times farther from the Sun than Earth does. The sunlight that reaches it is roughly 1,000 to 1,500 times dimmer than the sunlight that reaches us. At midday, on Pluto, standing in full sunlight on the surface, the illumination would be roughly equivalent to the light at deep twilight on Earth. Not dark, not blind, but deeply subdued. The kind of light in which the eye can see, but colors are muted and shadows have soft edges. And yet it is not dark. That is the thing worth sitting with. Pluto is not in darkness. It is in a kind of permanent late dusk, a thin, quiet, perpetual twilight that comes from a sun too small to warm, but not too small to illuminate. The landscape exists in this threshold light, always just before dark, always just bright enough. The landscape. In 2015, the New Horizons spacecraft flew past Pluto, the first and, so far, only time a human-made object has done so, and returned images that genuinely astonished planetary scientists. They had expected a featureless, cratered, geologically dead world. What they found was extraordinary. There is a vast, heart-shaped plain at Pluto's equator, officially named Tombor Regio, after Clyde Tombaugh, the astronomer who discovered Pluto in 1930. Within this region lies a smooth, bright expanse called Sputnik Planitia, roughly the size of Texas, covered in nitrogen ice, so flat and fresh-looking that it has almost no impact craters at all. The nitrogen ice on Sputnik Planitia convects slowly, cells of warmer nitrogen ice rising from below, and cooler ice sinking, driven by the tiny internal heat still leaking from Pluto's interior, leaving patterns on the surface like the top of a cooling custard, cellular and soft-edged and surprisingly uniform. It is one of the strangest things we have found in the outer solar system, a world so far from the Sun that its surface temperature hovers around -230 degrees Celsius, actively resurfacing itself. Pluto is geologically alive, in a small and slow and frozen way. Standing on Sputnik Planitia, the ground underfoot would be smooth and pale, the nitrogen ice slightly bluish-white, the cellular texture visible underfoot, but not rough, more like the gentle articulation of slow geological process than the jagged randomness of an impact-cratered world. The horizon would be close, Pluto is small, and the curvature drops away faster, and beyond the plains, at the edges of the heart, mountains of water ice rise to several kilometers in height. Water ice, at Pluto's temperatures, is hard as rock and just as enduring. These mountains are old. In the sky above Pluto, Charon hangs. Pluto's largest moon is remarkable for its relative size, roughly half the diameter of Pluto itself, the largest moon-to-planet size ratio in the solar system. The two bodies are tidally locked to each other, meaning they each keep the same face pointed toward the other, orbiting their common center of gravity in a slow, paired dance. Charon hangs in a fixed position in Pluto's sky. It neither rises nor sets. It is simply always there, on the hemisphere it belongs to, its surface visible to the naked eye as a dark reddish patch on one pole and pale grey everywhere else. From the far side of Pluto, you would never see Charon at all. There is something in that. A moon you either always have or never have, depending only on where you stand. The outer solar system, at these distances, has a quality of remove that is different from anything the inner planets offer. The space between Pluto and the Sun is not empty. It contains the Kuiper Belt, a vast region of icy objects that extends tens of billions of kilometers in every direction. But at human scales of perception, it is deeply, comprehensively vacant. No other lights move against the stars. The Sun is a bright point. Charon is a companion. The stars are the same stars you have always known, but quieter somehow, as though even they are aware of the distance. Pluto does not feel bleak. That word implies an absence of something that should be there. Pluto has everything it should have. It has its plains of convecting nitrogen. It has its mountains of ancient ice. It has its companion moon suspended in its eternal position. It has its twilight sun, steady and distant, providing its thin but real illumination. What Pluto offers is remoteness without exile. It is simply a place that is very far away, doing its slow work, in a quality of light that asks nothing of you. The cold here is total, and therefore somehow beyond category. The silence is the silence of great distance, where nothing carries, and the universe holds its breath. To rest in that silence, to let the thin light of that distant sun fall on you, to watch the slow patterns on the nitrogen plane, to see Charon hanging in its fixed position, steady, always there, is to feel something that is almost the opposite of urgency. There is nothing here that needs to be done. There is only the distance, and the cold, and the quiet, and the sun that warms nothing but illuminates everything, steady and patient as the thought of home. You do not need to hold every detail here. Pluto is the kind of place the mind can simply drift through. The cold deepens. We have moved, in the course of this night, from the familiar warmth of home to places of increasing stillness. And here, in the outer reaches of the solar system's known territory, we arrive at a world that has traveled farther to reach its present home than almost anything else we know. Triton is the largest moon of Neptune. Unlike the major moons of most other planets, it orbits in retrograde, in the opposite direction to Neptune's own rotation, a signature that tells us it did not form here, but arrived from somewhere further out, drawn in by Neptune's gravity long ago. It has been here a very long time, and the surface holds that time quietly, in the way that very cold, very still places tend to do. The surface of Triton is one of the most reflective in the solar system, covered in nitrogen ice, methane ice, carbon dioxide frost. The south polar cap carries a faint pink tint, stained by complex organic compounds formed over millennia as radiation interacts with the surface ices. The overall color is subtle, pale, slightly pinkish in some regions, slightly bluish in others, the color of old ivory or paper in indirect light, a world of very gentle tones. The landscape that Voyager 2 revealed in 1989, the only spacecraft ever to visit, is striking for its quietness. Some regions show a dimpled, irregular texture that planetary scientists call cantaloupe terrain. Others are smooth plains of frozen nitrogen, patiently flat. Along the south polar cap, dark streaks mark the downwind traces of nitrogen geysers, plumes energized by sunlight warming the transparent ice from below, rising perhaps 8 kilometers before drifting and settling. Their traces are faint lines on the frost, evidence of the smallest possible activity in the quietest possible place. Neptune hangs above Triton's sky. From Triton, Neptune appears roughly 14 times larger than the full moon from Earth. Its color is one of the most vivid in the solar system, a deep, saturated blue produced by methane in its upper atmosphere absorbing the warmer wavelengths of sunlight. From Triton, Neptune would appear as an enormous, intensely blue disk against the black sky, faint banding visible across its surface, its long oval storms drifting slowly in the deep cold. It is a strange pairing, the pale, near-colorless surface below, and that brilliant blue world above. Like a moon dreaming of color, it does not itself possess. The light is dim here. Neptune sits 30 times farther from the Sun than Earth. Sunlight at this distance is roughly 900 times weaker than what we receive, and yet the Sun still casts shadows on Triton's surface, faint, soft-edged, but real. The world is visible. The blue of Neptune is visible. The pale ivory tones of the surface are visible in that quiet, perpetual underdimness. There is a quality to dreaming sometimes, where the images carry this character, muted in color, slightly dim, not quite as vivid as waking perception, but entirely coherent. The world is present. It is simply turned down, the way sounds from another room are turned down, audible but not demanding. Triton has that quality. If your thoughts have begun to loosen, you can let them. Triton does not ask for your full attention, and Neptune hangs above it, blue against the dark, while the pale surface catches its dim, ancient light, and the plumes leave their faint traces on the frost, and the cold holds everything in its particular stillness. You are very far from home now, and sleep here would be very deep. Among the billions of planets orbiting other stars, a particular kind of world has emerged as one of the most likely places to find conditions hospitable to life as we understand it. These planets orbit close to small, dim, red dwarf stars, stars cooler and less luminous than our Sun, which shine with a reddish-orange light and can burn steadily for tens of billions of years, far longer than our own star's expected lifespan. Because these stars are dim, the zone in which temperatures allow for liquid water on a planet's surface sits much closer to the star than Earth is to the Sun, and at those close distances, something else happens. The planet becomes tidally locked. Tidal locking is the same process that keeps the moon's near side always facing Earth, and that keeps Charon always facing Pluto. When a body orbits close enough to its gravitational partner, the partner's tidal forces slow the body's rotation until one side always faces inward and one side always faces away. The planet stops turning relative to its star. On such a world, one hemisphere is in permanent day. The star hangs in the sky, motionless, pouring its reddish light onto the same surface without pause. On the far side, permanent night. And between these two hemispheres, a belt, a ring encircling the entire planet at the boundary between day and night, where the sun sits perpetually on the horizon, a zone of eternal twilight. At least one nearby system almost certainly hosts rocky worlds arranged this way. divided between permanent day, permanent night, and that narrow belt of endless dusk between. We cannot yet see such surfaces in detail, but the physics tells us what the light would be. Stand in the twilight belt. The star is on your horizon, not rising, not setting, simply there. And because red dwarf stars, though cool and dim, would appear large in the sky of a close orbiting planet, the disk on your horizon would be broad and warm, its light coming in at the lowest possible angle, the golden hour, not as a moment that passes, but as the permanent architecture of the day. The sky above you would grade from deep amber near the star's disk on one side of the horizon, through something between blue and indigo overhead, toward the dark of the night-side sky on the other. Stars might be visible even close to the horizon. The star too cool, the atmosphere perhaps thin enough to scatter their light away. You would stand under a sky that was simultaneously sunset and starfield, both at once, always. The light on the ground would come in entirely horizontal, falling across every surface the way late afternoon light falls on Earth, catching every edge, every small irregularity of the terrain. A landscape lit completely in the mode we call beautiful. Everything at this angle looks considered, deliberate. Long shadows stretch away from every stone, every low ridge, every feature of the ground, parallel and infinite, always pointing in the same direction, always pointing toward the dark. There would be wind on a tidally locked world. The temperature difference between the permanent day and permanent night hemispheres creates a persistent pressure gradient, and air moves along that gradient in a slow, continuous flow. A prevailing wind, always in the same direction, always from the same horizon. Any creature that evolved in this belt would have direction built into its body at the most fundamental level. The wind would be a kind of north, the warm side would be a kind of south. There would be no need for a compass. The world itself would always point. The temperature in this twilight belt might be surprisingly temperate, sheltered from the scorching of the permanent day side and the deep freeze of the permanent night, moderated by the steady atmospheric flow between them. A narrow ribbon of the possible circling an entire world, always at dusk. We romanticize twilight on Earth. We paint it, we photograph it obsessively. We build words around it in almost every language. The gloaming, the magic hour, the hour between dog and wolf. We feel it in the body as something particular, a loosening, a slowing, a quality of permission that says the day's demands are finishing, that what remains belongs to you. On a tidally locked world in the belt of its star, that feeling would be structural. It would be built into the physics of the place. Every moment here is the last light. Every breath taken in this belt is taken at the edge of the day where warmth and dark hold their permanent, unmoving boundary. If rest has a landscape, if there is a configuration of light and gravity and atmosphere somewhere in the universe that is geometrically shaped for the act of letting go, this belt, this endless threshold, might be the closest thing to it that physics has made. We do not know whether anything has ever stood there in that steady wind, under that amber and indigo sky, and felt the particular relief of a day that was always almost over. But the light is real, and it is falling somewhere right now on a horizon that never changes, in a dusk that never ends. We have travelled far tonight, from the pale silence of the moon to the dusty solitude of Mars, through Titan's amber haze and across Europa's luminous ice, past the plumes of Enceladus and beneath the enormous architecture of Saturn's rings, out into the dim twilight of Pluto and the pale frozen plain of Triton, and further still in imagination to a world that has never left its sunset. Each of those places are real. The physics that shape them are real. The light that falls on them right now as you rest. Traveling across distances that the mind cannot quite hold, but that the imagination can receive if you allow it. And now, gently, we return, back past Triton with Neptune hanging blue above the frost, back past Pluto's quiet plains, back past the ringed grandeur of Saturn and the icy moons at its waist, back past the rust and solitude of Mars, back to this, to clouds, real clouds, soft and white and grey and always different, moving across skies of genuine blue. A blue produced by the right atmosphere at the right distance, the only sky we have ever touched, to oceans made of water, and the sound water makes when it moves, and the smell it carries on a night wind. To the moon, our moon, rising over a dark landscape somewhere on Earth tonight, its light falling silver on the ground, the way it has for longer than our kind has been here to see it. Tonight itself, the night we know, the particular quality of dark that belongs to a world with this much life in it, the way it sounds when it is quiet, the way it settles over a room. You have been to other worlds tonight, and you have come back. Each of them offered something genuine, quiet and worth your time. But this is where you are. You can let your body be a little heavier now. And this night, with its clouds, and its one moon, and its familiar stars, is the night your body has always known how to receive. The darkness that has carried every version of you that has ever been tired. Let it carry you. The worlds you visited tonight may return in other forms, softer and stranger as sleep makes them its own. And here, beneath the familiar dark, you are already home.